Greetings, Internet, and welcome to another mildly interesting episode of Real Debate. As always, I'm Kyle. Joining me this week, we have Jon.
Yo.
And Nate.
Hello.
So, for a while now, I've been wanting to do a space battle, and the problem is that they tend to focus on a couple of fighters, and you don't really get to see the big picture. But I think we can get away with reviewing the battle over Endor. And a quick note, we aren't going to focus on the most optimal forms of space battle, which is, fire your first volley several hours before the engagement truly begins. Because Star Wars has always focused on World War II style dogfights and naval combat. True 3D combat is kind of hard to show, and frankly, most people don't comprehend it. So I'm going to let it slide. Also, it's a little difficult to summarize, but if there's one movie I expect my one audience member to have seen, it's this movie.
I mean, we love doing Star Wars. I mean, we've done pretty much all of them, and this was one of the movies that we really wanted to do because it actually, you're able to see a lot of, not a lot of one-on-one fighting. It's, the general overview of things, both from from the home flagships of both sides and, from a far off distance on the Death Star.
Yeah.
I mean, we always have the Clone War cartoon to get through if we decide we need more Star Wars in our lives.
Please, no.
I mean, Rebels is actually was pretty
I've heard
decent.
that it's really good, actually.
Yeah. It's a little kiddie early on, but it's Star Wars.
So the battle begins with the Rebel Alliance jumping out of hyperspace to do a hit and run on Darth Vader's house. One person might get that reference, by the way. Only to realize that they're being jammed and it's a trap. To make things even worse, they find out that Darth Vader's house has a fully armed and operational super laser. Quickly, the rebels decide that hugging the Star Destroyers is safer than being out where the super laser can hit them. So they engage until the shields are taken out by the ground forces. Finally, the greatest hero in the Rebel Alliance, Wedge Antilles, destroys the North Reactor and Darth Vader's house explodes, dropping enough debris on the forest moon of Endor to wipe out the Ewok menace once and for all.
Thank the gods.
Yeah, it's actually in one of the X-Wing books. When they go to Coruscant, they go to a museum and they see Ewoks, and they talk about how they're now extinct faction and or extinct race. And so someone online did the math about the amount of mass that's in the Death Star and how much debris would rain down upon the planet, and it would be an extinction event. So they have that party, they book it off the planet, and then everything dies, and they just leave it to burn. So who's really better in this case, the Empire or the Rebels?
I mean, the Rebels did cause the death of the Ewoks, so, that's always a plus.
If only they can do the same to the Gungans.
Well, if you've ever read of Darths and Droids, they technically did do that to the Gungans.
Nice.
Are we the bad guys?
Yes, they are, and I do not associate with those people.
No, I mean, are we the Empire in this case? Because we don't care about the other races and
you
other
know
species?
firm well that I do only play as Empire in X-Wing.
Yeah, I do prefer to play them too.
So what about the strategy and tactics that we have for the space battle, as far as what they tried to do?
So, in my notes, I wrote down that the Empire still refuses to build some sort of dedicated anti-fighter, because everything about the Rebel Alliance is hit and run. They rarely bring large ships. It's usually stub fighters, and the upgrade from the Imperial 1 to the Imperial 2 Star Destroyer was take off all point defense laser systems, and nothing about their fleet implies that they're bringing ships that are dedicated to being point defense ships. They think that their TIE fighters are going to do it.
I mean, and this is a part that I'm going to bring up later as well, is there were no real large naval combats from this because the Mon Cals were just recently into the war, and there wasn't a lot of broadside fighting between the two. So having the Lancers and point defense frigates and strike cruisers would be amazing anti-ships, and that's clearly they haven't learned anything, or Palpatine's just jerking off on Coruscant.
Well, yeah, he found himself a new young Skywalker, and he's excited to get in that.
What? Hey, little boy. It's terrible.
You're welcome for
The-
that image.
The Presbyterian Church is here.
One of the things that kind of confused me about that battle was why, when the Star Destroyers came into the battle, why they didn't just open up fire with their heavy weapons immediately. They were like waiting for an order or something.
They were ordered by the Emperor to not fire unless they came within closer range.
Or they were like afraid they were going to hit the Death Star or something. Doesn't it have a huge shield?
What it was the Emperor trying to do. He wanted Luke on his side, so he wanted to see the folly of his way and the Rebel Alliance, that they were utterly just going to die and flounder. I don't know why he thought that the Rebels weren't going to fight there, because the Imperials had interdictors and they weren't going to be able to hyperspace away. Not that they would have in this case, but he wanted Luke just to feel so much despair that he would turn to the dark side.
Yeah.
I don't know if there were officially interdictors there, because the rebels talk about the whole fight like they could retreat.
I mean, yeah, in the movie, but that's what we're kind of looking at.
Yeah,
To be fair, they're also in the gravity well of Endor as well, so they wouldn't be able to hyperspace out.
yeah.
They would have to.
Although they do seem to play it fast and loose with how gravity wells work.
Yeah, a little bit.
I really don't like what they did in Episode 7. I really don't.
Fun movie, but it's one of those you can't think about too hard.
Yeah, that was like my biggest complaint, is them going through a shield at hyperspace into a gravity well. I was like, I've read the books. It doesn't work that way.
But isn't that why they retcon so much stuff, so they can make new rules?
Yeah. So yeah, we see the rebel forces decide to get close to the Star Destroyer group. So there's about 33 Star Destroyers there of mixed classes of the Victories, Imp Star Deuces, and then the Executor was there as well. It's Vader's Death Squad.
That would be the Super Star Destroyer.
Yeah. That was part of his squad of Star
Isn't that
Destroyers.
the one that crashes into the Death Star?
Yes.
And there's about 20...
I'm going to try to put pictures for all of this, though this might be a difficult one for me to do.
Yeah, there's about 20 Moncal MC-80As. And then for some reason there's the transport ships. The Bs are there as well. They're good for breaking lines. And then they have a bunch of Corellian gunships as well. And then there's a complement of about 1,500 starfighters between both sides, according to the... So all this information was from the Star Wars Complete Guide to War. So yeah, it's a huge fleets on either side. The rebels were amassing for a long time, and same with the Empire as well. So, but the rebels were definitely outnumbered, and I think only 2 ships are blown up by the Death Star. So,
If I remember correctly, the Rebel fleet doesn't really have a lot of Dreadnought class ships that have like heavy weapons on them, do they?
Technically, Dreadnought has never been a class. It's just been the name of a couple of ships.
No, you know what I mean.
Yeah, that's actually a fun technicality that I like to bring up.
Yeah.
It's not pointing out. Well, actually, it's just a. Did you actually know that this is a fact?
yeah, the Dreadnought is the Super Star Destroyer class.
Yeah.
And Home 1 is technically like on the brink between Battle Cruiser and...
Home Run would be... Home Run. Home 1 is technically a capital ship.
The Empire had them outgunned, and an MC-80A can... it loses like 80%, or it's only like 20% worse than Imp Star Destroyer, so...
Yeah.
I think what they did was they used the Akbar Slash, where they go in between some of the ships and then cause broadsides. So then they get firing arcs on both sides, and then the Star Destroyers can't shoot because if they miss, then they're going to hit their own ships.
Yeah.
And so that's what they did because the Imperial were using static defense, but the time flow of this movie is really weird with how things happen because when they take down the Super Star Destroyer and immediately crashes into the Death Star, that means that it would have had to been very close to the Death Star. So we must have missed a lot of maneuvering.
Yeah, clearly.
Because, it lost temporary power, and so the gravity well of the Death Star sucked it in.
I also kind of wonder why taking out the bridge of that ship somehow managed to disrupt its ability to maintain its position in gravity.
So it messed with the power in it and disrupted that, and they have secondary bridges on Star Destroyers, especially with the Super Star Destroyer.
Yeah.
I don't have an answer to your question.
So my understanding is the Empire was often paranoid of like, oh, someone's going to try to take control of the ship and steal the whole thing. So let's put some really stupid safety measures in it.
Yeah, I could see that.
Mm-hmm.
So, the bridge was destroyed? Well, obviously, either saboteurs did it or the officers did it. Therefore, all power should temporarily be disrupted.
Except when you're about to crash into a planet.
Yeah.
That's no planet. So it seems like the Empire must have moved into formation around the Death Star because they realized the Death Star only got like 2 shots off against the Rebel fleet. It seems like the Rebels got close to the Death Star in order to counteract that, and pretty much their plans from the beginning changed once battle started and chaos ensued.
Yeah, it seemed like they were trying to hide behind the Star Destroyers to stop the Death Star from being able to fire, using their own units as cover, essentially. And then after they got word that the shield on the Death Star was down, then they moved in, I think is what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it said that the Rebels, once the shield went down, they kind of did like a blockade around it, so then more fighters couldn't get in after their ships. But
Yeah.
it's hard to tell with the cinematic because it's very quick paced, and seeing a time scale for how long this would have been, actually happening.
So, the next note I want to bring up is that the bridge of the Star Destroyer is so exposed that an A-Wing can take it out with a suicide attack.
Only once the shields are down.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that brings up a major problem is that only the commanding officer is able to look out into space to watch the battle ensue. Everyone else is incapable of seeing up and out of that window. So why is the bridge there?
It's a good point. I know that they had multiple shield projectors that were on these ships that had overlapping.
What I'm getting at is the bridge should be in the very dead center of the ship, meaning that you have to pound through countless layers of hull to finally damage what's controlling everything.
But then he can't be riding atop his glorious horse. Driving me closer, I want to hit them with my sword.
with your giant space sword. Or space triangle.
Look, we're not saying that they're well-designed ships by any means. They don't even have defensive lasers around the outside of it to be able to shoot the other ships. I mean, what's the point of those things?
And to be fair, the Moncals also have like a extended up bridge, but they can have like a 360-degree view, but it's still really weird.
What's the point of that? They have camera technology.
Right, and radar, and that's how they're tracking everything. And there is no tactical advantage for them being able to see out in space, really, because things are moving so quickly and are infinitesimally small when they're traveling so fast and at a distance that it wouldn't matter.
Nope.
So, the Rebel Alliance brought along their transport ships, which at no point in their history have ever been armed with weapons. Why are they there?
Meat shields.
I mean, do they have troops in them?
No, they don't even state what they carry. They just are always there and just get blown up at random. Like, the Rebel Alliance brings them to every naval battle, and no one knows why they're there or what they're carrying.
Maybe if they just loaded them up with explosives and just crashed them into the other ships, that might be more effective.
Right? I mean, just have a bunch of droids on board and fly them straight into the Star Destroyers, and then bam! It's like straight to transport for a Star Destroyer. It's good value.
No pilot like a kamikaze pilot.
Yeah.
And this is just a minor little nitpick, but the Nebulon B is just super thin.
Yeah, I know in one of the books they break it in half by shooting at the middle, and you know it goes down faster than the Titanic did.
I mean, the Titanic did take hours to go down, so
yeah. Yeah, and why they brought a medical frigate and why it's in the middle of battle. I mean, Nebulon Bs are good blockade runners, and that's what they were used for, is for punching through a defense and then getting behind lines, and then being able to hit the engines of things and, you know, weaken shields. But wasn't really shown, and there's only like one of them.
And it was a medical frigate at that, so... Like, I get that having a medical frigate isn't a bad idea, but why was it in this battle?
So how many TIE fighters did the Empire have in that battle again?
From the... I don't know whether it was 1,500 between the two sides or it was 1,500 for just the Empire.
A lot.
Yeah.
Because each Star Destroyer carries several hundred, I want to say.
Nah, it's I think 72. So yeah, I think the typical M-Star carries a complement of 72, so 6 wings of TIE fighters. So with about 20 to 25 ships, that'd be about 1,500. So I think on the Imperial end, it would be 1,500 then.
Yeah. Why didn't they use like swarm tactics since they know they have exposed areas?
That's generally the plan. So something that comes up in the books, and I'm trying not to turn to the books too much, but something that Wedge Antilles says is the problem with swarm tactics is that you run the risk of, one, hitting your own ships, two, you aren't able to maneuver because you have either other ships following you or your own ships prevent you from being able to move into another space.
Mm-hmm.
So that becomes a huge problem.
Yeah, but they could set up a blockade, like a living shield of TIE fighters, to stop the rebel ships from being able to get into the
since
vent.
this seems to operate under World War II style fighter logic, it's less of they can stop and more of they have to move at a certain speed.
Yeah, that's true.
And in the X-Wing tabletop game, the only ship that can pull a full stop is the Lambda class shuttle.
But not canon. So one of the things that they do is the Empire does waste a lot of ships, a lot of their fighters early on, going against the Rebel fleet and wait for bombers to come in, and then that's when they kind of close lines. Is when the bombers for both sides are able to hit the capital ships, and the Rebel fighters are superior. Well, the X-Wing and the X-Wing and the TIE Fighter, just the regular TIE Fighter, are about even in space. In terms of maneuverability, speed, and firepower, minus the proton torpedoes. But the X-Wings and Rebel ships have shields, so indirect fire doesn't take them out. Or like a straight shot can have them survive. Yeah, and like I brought up earlier, is there weren't many recordings of broadside fire fighting, and the Rebels came prepared for that, and the Imperials were not as much.
Despite it being what seems to be their preferred tactic, even though no one in the galaxy seems to give them a broadside fire fight.
Yeah, and that's what the Imperial Star Destroyers are meant to do, is win in a broadside fight.
When they're not even optimally designed to win a broadside fight.
Yeah.
Nope. Like, there are only a handful of changes that need to be done to the Star Destroyer to make it godly in a broadside fight. And it's so irritating that they have made none of those changes.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and the Star Destroyers were good at taking out like corvettes and stuff rather than other capital ships. But it's still they still overpower the MC-80s, and if they had focused fire even a little bit, then or had some sound of tactic, then they would have been fine. But I know one of the Grand Admirals was killed early on in the fight as well, so that may have disrupted it.
Because there were, two admirals, Darth Vader and Palpatine at the fight.
Yeah.
I know, I keep saying Darth Vader. It's because it's funny to me.
Take me to
the
that
hospital
video
right now!
Take me to that video right now. Link. So yeah, I mean, once the Executor, gets destroyed, and then the Death Star, the Imperial fleet falls apart, and win good day for the rebels. Is there anything else you guys want to bring up?
Let's see. So this is just another minor thing that irritates me, is how the Death Star fires. Because it fires multiple lasers, they all meet up and then shoot into one single laser.
That's not how light works.
I mean, most likely what irritates me most is that what they call laser weapons are obviously plasma weapons. What they call plasma weapons are obviously laser weapons. What they call kinetic weapons are just frickin' guns.
Yep.
So I think in the Star Wars universe, it's the rule of cool that it looks a lot better as kind of a dimple rather than, and then the lasers converging rather than having like beams of or just like mirrors on the side that would reflect it into one singular beam, kind of like how the shield generator looks, but in space, because that would look kind of really wonky, and so the dimple I think looks a lot cooler. So I think they went with the rule of cool route.
Probably.
But yeah,
that's just a minor thing that irritates me. Like, I've thought about that since I was like 4.
there's a lot of things that minorly irritate you.
Yeah, like you breathing. So we see minimal turbo lasers on the hull of the Death Star. Why did they decide to immediately go and hug the Star Destroyers instead of just get close to the Death Star and stay out of its firing arcs?
The shield was up.
Yeah, but they knew about where the shield could project to, and they could just go around and say, I don't know, behind the Death Star?
I think because the Death Star creates its own gravity well, that it would act like a
they're already in
planetoid.
the gravity well of the forest moon of Endor, Endor itself, and it's 15 other moons?
But it would require more power to not go into it because it's sucking in, and frankly,
Gravity doesn't suck.
I don't have a good argument for this. Okay,
Then why are you arguing
turn
it?
around?
because that's what we do on this podcast.
Can't the Death Star turn around?
Yeah, but the size of that thing to rotate, they can just be orbiting the damn thing, and it'll never catch up to them.
I don't know. It seemed to maneuver pretty good to be able to shoot a couple of those ships.
Well, I think okay, I have a good argument. It's they didn't want to show the backside of the Star Destroyer or Death Star.
That is actually in my notes. I desperately need to see what the back of this Death Star looks like. Because what the fuck does that look like? I need to know. I need to know what its engines look like. Does it have engines? Is it just like a flat... Yeah! Sorry, I need to know, and I can't find anything to show me what it looks like.
I know what it is. It's a hoop skirt. Because this is no ordinary non-moon. This is Sailor Space Station.
For the last time, either drop schematics and I'll get someone to sew it, or stop talking about this.
It is my original joke, and I will plug it wherever I can.
All right, so what would you grade the two armies on?
Well, I do have one more note.
Oh, you do? Okay.
So, if the Empire had automatically moved its Star Destroyers into the Rebel fleet, they most likely would have saved themselves a lot of resources. All in all, this was just Palpatine trying to seduce Luke. All in all, this comes down to space wizards making everything worse.
Oh yeah.
They should have bought him dinner first.
I guess that was how he seduced Anakin. He took him to dinner and a show, and
He thought he's like, oh, like father, like son. Maybe this one will go down the dark path, if you know what I mean.
the
Keeping
dark
it in
path
the family,
being,
huh?
the dark path being to Emperor Palpatine's butt, right?
Yeah, it's a very dark path.
Yeah. I don't know. Have you seen how pale he is?
Yeah, but you know he hasn't wiped in like 40 years.
No, I don't know that, and I don't want to know how you know that.
He's rich and old.
He probably has a bidet or space bidet.
Yeah, or he's just realized that he doesn't have to anymore.
Damn the dark side.
Damn it, and its lack of toilet paper.
Wait. Maybe the Emperor doesn't have an anus, so it's always clean.
I don't know about that. I think the darkness is what fuels his power.
So is this like some sort of fucked up Samson? Except for instead of haircuts, it's wiping. Oh god, I have to keep all of this in, don't I?
Mm-hmm.
I am so sorry to our one listener.
Toilet humor.
Alright, so what would you rate the Rebels, Nate?
I mean, they pulled off a daring strategy that was... They had a backup plan that they were able to go to, and somebody that was able to think on their feet with Admiral Akbar.
Or like in his chair.
Yeah. The Rebels did suffer about 20% losses, and then their fleet was damaged by about 75% that needed desperate repairs. So I would probably give them like a B because they got their objective done. They were able to think on their feet or engines or whatever.
I'm just trying to make you
The term you're
screw
looking
up.
for is think on the fly.
Look, that's probably a lot better. They're able to think on the fly and adjust their tactics accordingly. They have a good amount of support ships that use multiple roles, and they use it successfully. So I give them a B. Empire F. I don't think I need any explanation why.
All right, John, what would you rate them?
It's a tough one. The Rebels, I'd probably have to give them... I'd say probably a C. Just because I feel like they could have maneuvered a lot better and utilized some of their ships more effectively than they did. They kind of left themselves in a lot of areas to get shot at, and were kind of... I do give them good points for using kamikaze tactics, I guess. Kamikaze pilots always get a bonus points in my book, but the Empire, yeah, definitely an F. That just, they didn't do anything. They didn't use any of their ships correctly. They had all the advantages, and the only thing that really seemed to do anything was the Death Star taking out a couple ships. When did those Star Destroyers even take out anything?
Off screen.
Yeah, off screen.
In the novels.
Bad. No. Fail.
So this is a tough one because on the one hand, the Rebels' entire plan was to do a hit and run combat. They were drawn into a fight. They thought on their feet, they planned around it, and they made the tough call of don't retreat and keep pushing forward. So honestly, I'll give them a C. It's really tough to rate that. The Empire an F.
Mm-hmm.
They had what it took to succeed, but if it weren't for space wizards screwing with reasonable tactics, they would have won. It all comes down to space wizards making everything worse.
And nobody focused down and tried to destroy the aluminum falcon.
What the hell's an aluminum falcon?
But what do you think? Are we blithering idiots? Did we miss something? Do you agree with us? Let us know in the comments below.
It's a trap!